The college football transfer portal has been extremely chaotic since it opened up on Monday, but it's been eerily quiet on the Notre Dame front. Why is that? Plus, what position should Notre Dame target once they enter the fray? That's all coming right up on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. And great to have you here on Wednesday, December 11th. And thanks for starting your day right here by making this your first listen of the day. Quick reminder to subscribe to the channel if you are watching along on YouTube, or subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. As Notre Dame prepares to take on the Indiana Hoosiers and attempt to make a deep run in the college football playoff, Marcus Freeman, his coaching staff, GM Chad Bowden, and all the members of the support staff are also working very hard behind the scenes to build out the roster for next season via the transfer portal. Today, I'm going to break down which positions I believe Notre Dame should prioritize the most in this December cycle. And in theory, Notre Dame should explore options at every position, but given the roster turnover after this year, a couple stand out, like defensive tackle and wide receiver. But first, I want to explain a few things, and particularly why things have been pretty quiet on the Notre Dame front since the portal opened, because I have been asked a ton of times lately who Notre Dame is targeting, when we're going to find out about guys in the current roster who might be looking to leave, and all of that. And I get it, because you look around college football, most of the news cycle has been dominated by the transfer portal since it opened up on Monday, but you haven't really heard anything in regards to Notre Dame. There's a real reason for that. The honest answer as to what I know is that I don't know all the details, and we're not going to find out anything official until after the season is over. Let me explain. The fact that Notre Dame is in the college football playoff certainly complicates things as it relates to the transfer portal, but believe me when I tell you, they aren't sitting out this portal window just because they made it to the college football playoff. I think anyone with a brain can look at the college football calendar and point out that it is extremely stupid that we have free agency right before the playoffs, and that teams who are in the playoffs have to deal with this as they prep for the biggest game and games of the entire season. But that's just the way it is. I mean, the NCAA and the conference commissioners are going to tell you it's because of the academic calendar, but they can figure out a way around that. Believe me, I think things are going to get changed soon. But for now, we have to deal with this incredibly dumb system that puts teams like Notre Dame at somewhat of a disadvantage in the sense that they're preparing for the college football playoff, but also have to deal with the transfer portal at the same time. So there's a few things that you need to know. First off, players have until December 28th to put their names in the portal. That does not mean they have to find their new schools by that date, or they can't return to their previous school by that point. But basically, they have a 20-day official window to decide whether or not to put their name in if they're an undergraduate player. However, players on college football playoff teams or players who choose to participate in bowl games are allowed an additional 5-day window once their season concludes. So once Notre Dame's season ends, all of the players on the current roster who intend to transfer out will make their announcements in the first 5 days that follow, more than likely. Graduate players can transfer in or out at any point, but they're likely to make their decisions known around the same time so they can join whatever team, their next destination, before the start of winter workouts, spring practice, all that stuff. Like, most everyone is going to want to make this move right now. There's going to be more players who leave in the spring cycle as opposed to a 20-day window. That one is a 10-day cycle that ends right after everyone wraps up with spring practice. So there's going to be more attrition in that window, but this is always the big one every single year. And you might have noticed that there are some players on playoff teams, like a Georgia or like an Arizona State, and some of their players have already announced that they will enter the transfer portal. They're allowed to do that. That's really up to those teams, those coaching staffs, those players, how they choose to handle it as they get ready for the college football playoff. But I get the sense that any Notre Dame player who decides to announce his decision to enter the transfer portal before the playoff game will likely not be allowed to participate or even dress for that game. Marcus Freeman is a new school guy. He's a young guy. He also has a very old school mentality. This is the same guy who had Kyle Hamilton and Kyron Williams, two stars of that team in 2021, sit in the stands during the Fiesta Bowl game, Marcus Freeman's first game as a head coach, instead of letting them stand on the sidelines with their teammates because they chose to opt out of the bowl game. Marcus Freeman said, if you opt out of the bowl game, you opt out of the team, you are not going to be with the team on the sidelines. Now, he has since come around to that slightly. He has allowed other players who have opted out to at least stand on the sidelines during bowl games, but he certainly does not agree with their decision. He's made that clear publicly in press conferences multiple times. But considering this is a playoff game and not like the Sun Bowl like last year, my guess is that Freeman would not let anyone who chooses to enter the transfer portal in the lead up be anywhere near the team during the preparation or during the actual game. That's just how it rolls. Honestly, I agree with that. I like that strategy, but you also have Kenny Dillingham, who is vocally supporting any players on his team who choose to enter the transfer portal at this time. It's up to the coaches. They get to choose how they want to do it. This is how Notre Dame is doing it, and it's also my hunch that the same Notre Dame coaching staff has a good idea of who is coming back and who's not already. As players work through agents to get these transfer deals done behind the scenes, word gets out, coaches know, and they're also dealing with these guys every single day in practice. Like, they're able to pick up the vibes. If guys are happy or unhappy with their current situations, they know. They're able to pick up on how they're feeling. They have a pretty good sense of where players stand right now, and there might be a few surprises. Sure, I think Rico Flores caught everyone by surprise at the end of last season. That's going to happen, but the staff has been preparing for this since like October, because that's kind of how you have to operate in this system. The actual window might only be open for 20 days, but a lot of these deals are done well in advance of it actually opening up. Is that how it's supposed to be? Probably not. As a matter of fact, it's definitely not if you read the bylaws, but there's also a reason why everyone in the world knew where Riley Leonard was going to end up from the moment he announced his intentions to enter the transfer portal. I mean, the same could be said about Sam Hartman as well. Before he even put his name in the transfer portal, we all started hearing that he was probably going to end up at Notre Dame before he even played his last bowl game at Wake Forest. That's just kind of how things work. Word gets out, agents leak information, or whoever's involved with the NIL deal, they want to tell the rich buddies at the country club. Like, it just so happens that way. And that's just the reality of the situation. It's also why you hear these coaches complain all the time, because it never stops for them. They're having to deal with players asking for more money during the season, threatening to transfer. It's unfortunate that they have to deal with it throughout the year, but that's also why they're getting paid more money now than they ever have in their entire careers. College coaches are making a ton of money, and Notre Dame is certainly not exempt from all this chaos that goes on behind the scenes in the transfer portal. They certainly try to do things the right way, but they also understand how this works, and they have been preparing for a very long time so that they are ready when the time comes. And the time has officially come for Notre Dame and everyone else in college football. There's all kinds of different reporting that's out there, especially as it pertains to Notre Dame and who they're going after in the transfer portal. But it's all purposefully ambiguous. As a wise man once said in Legacy Village, it is my understanding that Notre Dame has locked up a few guys already, and more are on the way. I don't have any specifics really that I can share beyond that. The staff has made it clear that they want the entire team to be focused on the playoff and not who could be on the team next year or who they're looking to add in the transfer portal. I totally get that. So while the team gets ready to make a run and accomplish something great, all the other stuff for next year is going to be kept under wraps by the staff. And personally, I totally agree with that. I don't think it's good for players on a playoff team, especially guys who are going to be playing, to be focused on the portal right now. This team is laser focused on the task at hand, and I'm certainly not going to jeopardize that by speculating which names Notre Dame might be in the mix for at this point in time. So instead, I'm going to break down which positions I think are the biggest needs for the Irish as they work to fill out what that roster is going to look like for next year. And I'll be honest, this is just my first crack at this. I'm probably going to do this same exact exercise multiple times throughout the offseason once we find out who is transferring out of Notre Dame, who is declaring for the NFL draft, and who Notre Dame brings in via the transfer portal. It's going to evolve constantly throughout the offseason, but as we sit here today, I believe there are 4 positions Notre Dame needs to prioritize more than anything else in this portal cycle. That's next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you will get started with $150 of bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And for some advice on your first $5 bet, I'm going to take the Los Angeles Rams plus 2.5 going up against the San Francisco 49ers on Thursday Night Football. The Niners have been a mess this year. It's been really unfortunate because I actually like the 49ers, but they have dealt with a rash of injuries, and pretty much anything that could possibly go wrong for this team this season has. I liked what the Rams did against the Bills this Sunday, so I'm taking the Rams plus 2.5. And for more, just visit FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. As Notre Dame looks to add in the transfer portal, the most important position to me, and it's not even really debatable, is defensive tackle. And in my opinion, they need to add at least two starters, and potentially 3 total defensive tackles in the transfer portal between now and the start of next season. And one of those guys has to be an absolute stud, because Notre Dame is going to lose Howard Cross and Riley Mills at the end of the season. Those are 2 really solid defensive tackles, 2 of the best players and leaders on the entire team. And Jason Onye's future remains pretty unclear at this point in time. I don't think he's going to be back. If he is back, that's great, because I think he was really starting to hit his stride as a player, but unfortunately, I don't really see that happening. So you're going to be without Cross, Mills, and Jason Onye. Those are 3 of your top defensive tackles at the start of the season. And I like Gabriel Rubio. He's a good player, but is he a frontline starter for a playoff team? I don't know. Also, can you rely on him? Because he was not a part of the university throughout the spring semester. Then he rejoined the team, and then he's had to deal with some injuries. So I don't know if you can really count on him being available throughout next season. So that is a concern as well, even though I think Gabriel Rubio is a really good player. I think he's best if he's like your third option at defensive tackle. Great rotational player, not necessarily a great or reliable starter. Donovan Heinisch is another player who I love. I love his attitude. I love his tenacity, but he's also pretty undersized, and he gets blown off the ball sometimes in run situations. Not a lot, but it happens enough that you start to notice it. And I love what his older brother did, Kurt, at Notre Dame. So I love the Heinisch family, and I definitely want Donovan Heinisch to be a big factor on next year's defense. But again, he's probably not a college football playoff caliber defensive tackle at this point in time. I don't think that's going to change between now and the start of next season. So they don't really have a ton of great options on the roster for next year, because behind Rubio and Heinisch, they need a lot of help. Armel Mukam is an older player compared to some of the other defensive tackles. He certainly has potential, but we just haven't seen enough of him to really know what Notre Dame has in him as a player right now. Cole Mullins and Sean Civillano are intriguing options, but they're going to be redshirt freshmen next year. I don't know if you can really depend on them too much to go from not playing at all to becoming significant contributors next year. I just don't really see that happening. And I'm sure, one would hope that either Devin Houston or Brennan Vernon can make a leap. I'm not counting on it. People ask about Brennan Vernon all the time. Look, I've made my stance on him pretty clear. When he was in high school at Mentor, I thought he was a little bit overrated as a recruit, and then it hasn't really worked out for him so far at Notre Dame. I really hope it does. I'm rooting for him. Northeast Ohio kid, all that stuff, but I just don't know if he's a fit on this team, especially at defensive tackle. He has not made any mark at Notre Dame so far. I don't really think that's going to change between now and then. So the reality is Notre Dame just doesn't have answers at defensive tackle on the roster right now. They need to find studs in the portal. Not just like one decent starter or something like that. They need a big-time player. And in order to do that, they're going to have to spend a lot of money, because outside of quarterback, defensive tackles are one of the most expensive positions in the transfer portal every single cycle, because every team in the country wants one, and they are one of the most crucial players on the field every single time they step out there. So Notre Dame is going to have to pay a pretty penny to get a couple studs at defensive tackle, but fortunately, Notre Dame is not going to have to pay for a starting quarterback this offseason. They are going to have to use pretty much all of that money on defensive tackle. They need 2 starters, hopefully 1 stud, and probably a rotation piece as well. Think like Chris Smith from Harvard a few years ago. They need to completely revamp that room in the transfer portal, and that is going to be a difficult task, but the most important one for this team and this coaching staff. And number 2, I've got wide receiver. It's a close second, but the focus here should be on quality, not quantity. I don't think we're going to see a situation like last year when Notre Dame had like 4 guys leave after the season at wide receiver, and then they had to basically rebuild that room in one offseason. Notre Dame is in the market for a boundary receiver. They might already have one locked up that's a familiar face, but we'll see how things shake out here over the course of the next few weeks. They are going to lose Bo Collins, Jane Harrison, Chris Mitchell, and I think they're probably going to lose at least one or two more guys because this is such a volatile position. Wide receivers transfer all the time. Like, I look at Deion Colsey and Jane Thomas. Those are two veterans. I love what Jane Thomas does for this team. Unsung hero. He's a great blocker, but his role in the passing game has certainly diminished over the course of the past year. So is he going to want to look elsewhere to a place where he could probably get more targets? Maybe. I would love for Notre Dame to have him back, but we're going to have to wait and see. Jane Greathouse and Jordan Faison are young, talented players. They're going to continue to develop. I think they have really bright futures, but they're also better in the slot. So Notre Dame still needs that boundary wide receiver. I think Micah Gilbert, the freshman, is going to be a dude, and we're going to see a lot more of him next year. He started to really flash during spring practice, had a couple touchdowns in the blue gold game. He's got a super bright future, but it's also good to have some veteran guys as well. I think Logan Saldate is another freshman who's going to emerge next year. KK Smith's status is up in the air. He just suffered a shoulder injury as well. So he could be another guy who potentially could enter the transfer portal, but he's dealing with an injury, so who really knows? And Cam Williams, the freshman, really highly rated recruit, still seems like he has a long way to go. Before you freak out, it does seem like the Notre Dame coaching staff always knew that his path to getting on the field is going to take a little bit longer because even though he's a great athlete, there's a lot of things that he has to learn about playing the wide receiver position. So he has a long way to go, and there is plenty of talent on this roster or in that receiver room, but still, you need to get a couple proven wide receivers, someone who can join this team and be the clear wide receiver one from day one. At one point, it looked like Notre Dame got one last year in Bo Collins, and he started off the year great. Big catch against Texas A&M, but his regression this year has certainly been concerning. They need someone who is better, who's honestly much better than Bo Collins for next year to be that wide receiver one, someone who can catch a bunch of passes and also come up with some big plays when you need them. And they just really need a big body who can run, maybe a couple other rotational guys depending on which other guys leave. But I think, again, it's going to come down for quality over quantity at the wide receiver position. Third, I got nickel. Notre Dame should continue their run to finding high-quality nickels in the portal because they're on a great stretch right now. This is not so much of a need as the other two positions when I look at like defensive tackle and wide receiver compared to nickel because I really, really like the freshman defensive backs that Notre Dame has coming in. But nickel is a position that is made for a veteran. And Notre Dame got a great veteran in Thomas Harper when he came over from Oklahoma State. And then Jordan Clark surprised a lot of people coming over from Arizona State in his 1 year with the Irish. I think he's been really good for this defense. And you think back to really when this all started was actually a player who is not found in the transfer portal. It was Tariq Bracy, who moved over to nickel as a veteran. He completely changed his career, his perception among Notre Dame fans at the end of his career because he thrived in that nickel role, and it's because it's a position for grown men. You have to be able to cover slot receivers and big body tight ends in man coverage. Plus, you have to be able to tackle well as a run defender and be an effective blitzer. It's not as simple as going out there and covering a wide receiver every single play and sometimes having to make some plays in the run game. Nickel is a very tough position. It is not easy, and you have to be good at a bunch of different things. You have to have great instincts, covering option routes and things like that. So that is why I think it'd be beneficial for Notre Dame to go try to find an underrated veteran again, just like they have the past couple of years, because it has been something that has worked for this defense, but it's not as much of a need as like wide receiver, defensive tackle, because if they do have to resort to some of those younger guys, there's plenty of talent there. I just think that they're better off having an older body in that spot. All right, Notre Dame should look to add at least one more starter in the transfer portal at a key position, plus some important rotational players as well. That's all coming up next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is also brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouthwatering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at OMAHAsteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code college. Minimum purchase may apply. It's going to be another year, another veteran kicker for Notre Dame in the transfer portal. And look, I understand that things have not worked out for Mitch Jeter since he came over from South Carolina, but he was still a great pickup at the time. 2 years of starting experience for the Gamecocks. He was deadly accurate. Also had some pretty good leg strength as well. Had hit a couple field goals over 50. And when he started at Notre Dame, like his first game of the season in the blue and gold, he came up huge for this team. He finished 3 of 3 on field goal attempts against Texas A&M, including 2 in some really clutch spots. And Notre Dame does not win that game without the help of Mitch Jeter. Now, unfortunately for Mitch, things have really not gone to plan since then. He had a kick blocked against Northern Illinois, got hurt a few weeks later, and he has not been the same guy since. It's been really frustrating and really disappointing because I feel for him. I think he's just dealing with some physical pain, but also a mental block because of the pain that he's been going through and the fact that he just hasn't been able to be himself. But still, the idea was right. You get a veteran kicker who's not afraid to kick on the road, and when Notre Dame needed him in that season opener, there was really no concern. He came through and he delivered. Now, Notre Dame is going to have to add another Mitch Jeter and just hope that he's able to remain healthy throughout the course of the next season. And yes, I do like that they were able to add a high school kicker, Eric Schmidt. It's good that they're going to have someone to develop in-house, but if another Mitch Jeter, someone like him, is available, they need to take him, and I think they will. Marty Biaggi has been pretty open about that as well. They're going to look to add a kicker every single year in the transfer portal. I'll be interested to see if they look at punters as well, because the James Rendell experiment hasn't really gone to plan, I would say. And if they can get a better kicker out there, or better punter out there, then they should go and try to get him. But we're going to have to wait and see. I do think that they will add a kicker. That I feel a lot more confident about, and they should, because it's more important to have someone who's done it before than someone who you're, especially a freshman, who you're developing in-house who has really never done it. When you have a team with playoff aspirations, it's always better to get a veteran kicker as opposed to a new young guy. All right, next up, I've got some positions here where I think it's important for Notre Dame to add someone, but it's not as important as defensive tackle, wide receiver, nickel. They're not necessarily looking for a starter, someone to come in day one and be that guy, but I think rotational pieces could be helpful. And defensive end is a position that's pretty tricky because they only lose R.J. Oben, and Jordan Botelho and Boubacar Traore will be back at some point next year, but when? And how effective are they going to be once they come back? Because Mitchell Evans tore his ACL in the middle of last season, and he really hasn't been the same all year. He played, he was good in certain spots, but he was not the same Mitchell Evans that we saw last year prior to that injury. Jordan Botelho had a ruptured patella. That is not something that's going to be easy to recover from. I'm glad he's coming back, 6th year veteran, was playing really well before the injury, but who knows when he's going to be ready to go. And Boubacar Traore, as I said after he got hurt, it's a big bummer for this year's team because he was really starting to excel, but it's even more concerning about next year and his development because he's not going to be able to do much in the offseason. He's going to be rehabbing a ton, and then similar timeline. Is he going to be back ready to go full speed at the start of next season? I doubt it. He might play, but I doubt he's going to be as effective until probably the middle to later portions of next year. So it would be helpful for Notre Dame to go out and get another defensive end in the transfer portal, but how attractive is this going to be for a guy in the portal? Because Bryce Young, who's a true freshman right now, is definitely going to take on a much bigger role for next year. That's really exciting because he has all the potential in the world. He looks like a future NFL player. Josh Burnham has been really good this year as well. He's had to move from strong side end to Viper, given the injuries that Notre Dame has sustained on the defensive line. Junior Tuihalamaka has been a revelation, but I think he's more of a depth piece going forward. The best case scenario for Notre Dame is Junior Tuihalamaka to be the first guy off the bench, because even though he's been good as a starter, he's not a game breaker, NFL draft pick or anything like that at the Viper position. So Notre Dame really needs to get those guys healthy, Botelho and Traore, but I'm just not sure when that will happen. And if they can get a guy like Javonte Jean-Baptiste again, go and get him. It's just a matter of, is that player going to want to come to Notre Dame when he looks at the depth chart and sees Botelho and Traore will come back at some point this year. Plus, Notre Dame is probably not going to want to pay a ton at this position, given the fact that they already have those guys, and you have to pay someone a lot if you want to get a quality player at the defensive end position, because every other team in the country wants a really good defensive end. So that's a tricky spot, but I do think Notre Dame is going to at least kick the tires on some top guys out there at defensive end. All right, a couple other positions I want to mention here. Safety, they're going to lose Xavier Watson, Rod Hurd. That definitely stings. Anytime you lose a player like Watts, that is not going to be easy to recover from, even though I think Adon Schuler is becoming a star, and he is going to help bridge that gap. But he's going to need some help, and I don't really know who that person is going to be who steps up next year. Luke Talek could be ready to start next year. We're going to have to wait and see. The former walk-on has really excelled, had that nice interception return against Florida State. But is he ready to be an every down player? We're going to have to wait and see. There are lots of young players who could step up and just really make a big jump like Adon Schuler did, who barely played at all last year and then has been a great player for this team this season. I mean, you got Kennedy Urlacher, who flashed against Purdue, but again, Purdue is the worst team ever assembled. And then true freshmen Tabron Benny Powell and Tate Johnson. They are exciting prospects, but they have also been hurt for the majority of this season. I'm not really sure if they're going to be ready to play for next year. Ben Minnick was someone who was talked about early on, but he's pretty undersized, and I feel like the talk around him has been really quiet as of late, so I think he's kind of gotten buried on the depth chart. So if Notre Dame is able to go out there and add another Rod Hurd-type player at safety, that would be great, because even though Rod Hurd has not been a starter for this year's team, he's been a really great rotational player, and Notre Dame could definitely benefit from adding another one of those guys for next year. Tight end, I mean, Mitchell Evans and Kevin Bowman are gone after this year, and Eli Raridon and Cooper Flanagan have a ton of potential, but so far that's kind of all we've seen is flashes of potential. We haven't really seen enough of them to be super confident about what they can do next year. But in fairness, we didn't really know what Notre Dame had in Mitchell Evans until he burst on the scene last season. So maybe next year it's time for Raridon or Cooper Flanagan to really step up and make that leap and become the next great Notre Dame tight end. So if that happens, great. But I wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame looked around to see if they could add another rotational tight end, because I think Jack Larson, the true freshman, still needs some time to develop into a college-ready tight end. But I could see a world where James Flanagan, who will be on the team as a true freshman next year, I could see him making an impact as a true freshman because he's so big and he's such a willing blocker already. Like, no one really expected Cooper Flanagan to play as much as he did as a true freshman. I could see something similar happening with James Flanagan. Okay, I'm going to say it. Don't get mad at me. Quarterback. Now, I'm not talking about a starter. I'm talking about a backup. Notre Dame is not going to add another starting quarterback in the transfer portal this offseason. Relax, okay? It's not going to happen. However, they might need some depth in that room because Riley Leonard is gone after this year, which leaves Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchey, and CJ Carr battling for one spot. What are the odds that all three of those guys are on the team at the start of next season? I would say it's pretty unlikely. I think that Notre Dame is going to have a difficult conversation with one of those guys and say, hey, it's a two-man race. Everyone is just sort of crowning CJ Carr to be the starter next year. I don't think it's that easy. He has barely thrown at all his freshman season. I think that is going to seriously impact his chances at starting next year. So maybe they do give Steve Angeli a chance next year. And if they do give Steve Angeli a chance, is Kenny Minchey like the middleman and the odd guy out there? I don't know. Or maybe Kenny Minchey is going to surprise everyone and be ready to go as the starter next year. We do not know. It's too early to tell, but I think that after spring, one of those guys is going to be gone. And if that's the case, then you only have two scholarship quarterbacks on your roster, and you cannot go into a season with only two scholarship quarterbacks on your roster. So is there like an FCS quarterback out there who's kind of proven himself and then wants to end his career on a big-time football team like Notre Dame and wants to just be a part as a backup? That would be a great option. Not someone who's going to compete as a starter, just someone who's able to come on the team and make an impact. Or maybe they just put Tyler Buckner back at quarterback. He's not going to be, a threat to any of the other guys. He's played quarterback in college before, so I think he might be a nice rotational piece. Ultimately, I think that's going to be the route they go there, but they might look to add a transfer portal quarterback again, but not a starter. There's a few positions that I have not mentioned. It's because I don't think it's necessary for them to add in the transfer portal. Cornerback, they're set. Loads of young talent there. Linebacker, they're set as well. I mean, maybe that changes if Jalen Snead decides to put his name in the transfer portal because they're going to lose Jack Kaiser, but they've got KVA, Drake Bowen, Jaden Osbury. That trio is awesome, and then you add in Madden Framo to that mix. He's going to play as a true freshman. That's a great group. Running back, they're stacked. Love, Price, Williams, and Young, they're all going to be back for next year as well. Offensive line, they literally have too many good players. Like, they really do. Some are going to leave because there are just so many really talented players in that offensive line room. Next year, they are going to have probably the best like 2-deep offensive line room in the entire country, so they do not need to bother with that at all. Overall, Notre Dame really just has to add at two of the most sought-after positions in the transfer portal, defensive tackle and wide receiver. They need to add some big-time players there because those are two positions that right now, when you project what they're going to be for next year, those look like some weak spots. Fortunately, wide receivers, there's plenty of them in the portal, plenty of really good players. Defensive tackle, it's going to be harder to come by, but Notre Dame is going to be willing to spend. I think they are going to make a lot of noise in the transfer portal once the time is right. It might be a few weeks because I think we all would rather Notre Dame go deep in the playoff and we can put all this transfer portal stuff on the back burner until then. But once that time comes, you know that we're going to have it covered here on the show with all the breaking news around the transfer portal and all that stuff. But for now, the focus is going to be on the playoff, but I wanted to get this done today because, like I said, been getting a lot of questions about the transfer portal. It's a very big topic in college football, and I wanted to address it on the show. That's going to do it for today's show. Tomorrow, we're going to get back into playoff mode with a very special guest. I had a chance to catch up with Pete Sampson from The Athletic, and he is very high on this Irish team and their chances to make a run in the college football playoff to the point where he thinks they're a legitimate national championship contender. So you are not going to want to miss that episode that's coming out tomorrow. Remember, subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. And if you enjoyed the show today, remember, give this video a like if you're watching along on YouTube or rate the podcast 5 stars and leave a review. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.